Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Social Service Funding Committee for 2021. Yay! It's been a while since we've gotten together. So there's this little thing called COVID where we haven't unfortunately been able to meet in person at all this year, maybe like in January, but that was probably the last time. So I miss seeing you all. We also have some new folks that are here with us. I'm very excited to have them. So I'm hoping we can do a round of introductions. Maybe if you just want to share name, pronouns, what, anything about yourself, and what brought you to this committee, and how long you've been on it if you're one of the returning folks. And then we'll get into some kind of sharing about the process and some best practice and advice for the new folks coming on later this evening too. But we'll just start with some intros. So I will start, I'll popcorn to somebody and then we'll go from there. So I'm Megan Cohen. I am the staff liaison to the committee from the city of Beaverton. I have been with the committee for 7 years now, and I love it and I enjoy it a lot. I've gotten to meet a lot of awesome people who are really dedicated to this work. My background was in nonprofit, so I really enjoy being able to be on this side of the table, helping to simplify the application, walk nonprofits through the process, and then give out money rather than be the person competing for it. So it's tough, and luckily we've got a great group of people responsible for wading through and figuring out what to do. So thankful for all of you and looking forward to a really awesome year. And I will popcorn to Lisa Stiller.
Remind me, our name, our...
pronouns. I should have said that. Mine are she, her.
Okay. Name, pronouns, and what else do you want from us?
How long you've been on the committee, and anything else you want to share. What brought you to this committee?
Okay, so I'm Lisa Stiller. Her, hers, she. And I came on, I think this is my 7th year. It's something I just can't let go of. It's like part of my life. It's one of those things where I feel like I'm really doing something useful, giving something back when there's so much other stuff going on around us. This is something that just feels hands-on, concrete, useful, where we can kind of take our values and sort of make something happen. So that's why I really love being on this committee. I've had a very boring life since March because school closed down and they're supposed to go back in person. One of the districts I sub for goes back in person into February, so I just can't wait. You know, they're letting subs get our shots, so go back and see kids again. But anyway, I will go to Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I've been on the committee for, 0 days now, right? And I joined because, I was really drawn to the committee. I've been an attorney at the public defender's office for a long time, and I see people every day, or now talk to people every day, who benefit from various nonprofits and social service grants. And so I was just really excited and drawn to this committee. I have to pick the next person. How about Hazel?
Hazel Wheeler, gender pronouns are he, his, him. I'm the Health and Safety Programs Manager for Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center. So unlike everybody who's had a relatively boring or different life since March, I have had a very adventuresome and professionally positive experience through COVID, because I'm in charge of all of our emergency management and our response to COVID and how that changes our functions and operations within the organization. So it's been busy and the year's kind of gone by. what draws me to this particular committee is that my background now is just social justice, emergency management, and public health, and those are all intertwined, and the community is only as strong as those that are most at risk within it. So that's kind of where my perspective comes from. I will go to Renu. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, that's right. My name is Renu Kamath, and the pronouns are he, his, him, and I've been on this is my third year on the committee. I was recruited to this committee, and since then I've really enjoyed it because of a couple of reasons. One is, even though we start off with differences of opinions, I think the way we come to a consensual decision is very interesting. The other thing that I found interesting about this committee is I get to review the financial statements of a lot of the nonprofits, and that shed some light on what they actually do with the money that we give them. So all in all, it's been a very interesting and a really great experience. And I will now hand it over to Jerome.
Well, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Jerome Sibayan. I go by the he, his pronouns. I'm, let's see, I've been on this committee. I think this is my third year too. So it's very enjoyable, and it's a lot of good work that gets done. I am a retired Army colonel, so I'm enjoying the boredom very much. Thank you. And it goes along with being an introvert too. It's like, this is heaven. This is so awesome. But anyway, let's see here. So yeah, amateur philanthropist, volunteer. I just kind of hang out and do things, and that's kind of my spiel. But I'll send it over to Lisa.
Okay. Of course, this is the moment that Emmett decides to run up to me. Just, you know, it had to happen. Yeah, okay, so I'm Lisa, and I use she, her pronouns. And give me 1 second.
Renu, I wanted to mention that the picture I had on the other site was before. I just cut off my awesome ponytail last week, so I just I'm going through a little withdrawal syndrome.
And you didn't have glasses either.
Not finding long hair everywhere is kind of a relief.
Did you see my note? Wei Wei's emailed me that she can't log in. Okay.
Yeah.
And you didn't have glasses either, Jerome.
I'm pretty sure I had. Oh yeah, in the picture.
On that picture.
Yeah.
I was gonna share just really fast for new folks. So Wei Wei is one of our other members. I think she came on the same time as, no, I think this will be her 4th year. So she just re-upped, which is very exciting. She was working for the school district and did some diversity, equity, inclusion training in her background. And I'm hoping you'll have a chance to meet her. And then we also had 2 folks, just wanted to acknowledge that we had 2 folks roll off this time. One was Erin Wooley, who had been with us for, I think, 6 years. And so she was wonderful to have. I'm gonna miss her a lot. And then also Tiffany is also rolling off this year. She and Renu, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Renu, are both on budget committee. And so they got to bring that kind of lens and overlap as well to the work that we do. And I'll turn it back to Lisa.
Yes, sorry. Okay. So I use she, her pronouns, and this is my 3rd year as well, I think, pretty sure. on the committee, and I am on the board of the South Beaverton Neighborhood Association Committee. I have been for about 4 or 5 years now, and I guess I was kind of recruited for this too by someone in the neighborhood program at the city, because they knew that this is the kind of thing I was really interested in getting involved in, and was kind of the reason that I got involved in the neighborhood association committee in the first place, was to support and find ways to be involved in this kind of work. I'm the only renter on the neighborhood association committee board. There are very few of us. So I feel like I have a little bit of representation I can give there. But yeah, that's me.
Hey, thanks everyone for sharing. I also, I don't know how much I've shared with returning folks, but this was by far the biggest slate of applications I've ever had for this committee during the recruitment season. So we had around 20 applications, I believe, with just really just the 2 open spots, with some folks rotating off. So it was a really great year. I think, a lot of folks are looking for ways to be involved. This is very direct and very connected to a lot of the work that's going on during COVID. So Hazel and Melissa beat them all out to be here tonight, and they're going to be a great addition. But I'm also hoping that we're able to bring some more folks on and continue growing our group, and just introducing some new perspectives. So we'll have more to talk about there, but might see some other folks join just as audience members or to shadow. I think this is one of the committees where you just kind of get thrown in, and there's a lot of process and a lot of work. So we can have some returning members share some insight and advice as we go through this evening, so that you both get a chance to hear kind of what that looks like moving forward. But I wanted to start really fast with just the schedule for this coming year, and see how it would work. We are planning basically for our entire season being virtual as a COVID precaution. We will notice and record meetings as we do them. There's a few different things. So you'll see the schedule on the chat. I can send it out and post it again so that you can see it, but there's some dates that are just for your knowledge, and then there's some for meetings. So I'll just walk through them. Applications are going to open February 1st. So it's coming up pretty fast, which is why I would like to make sure that we talk about just the application itself and anything we might want to include in there. On February 9th, I'm going to be holding a grant info session, just going over how much money we have, which areas are we targeting, anything they need to know that's different from past years. I have generally found that it's helpful if board members want to be there to help answer any questions that come up, or if folks have something specific that they're thinking about in evaluation. So if you'd like to come, it's optional, it's totally up to you. Hazel and Melissa too, it can also be a good place just to see kind of like a run through of what we share with nonprofits about the grant. So it's in the middle of a work day. So understand if you can't, I will record that and make that available as well. So that's February 9th. And then throughout the length of the grant being open, basically after February 9th through almost the end of the grant, on Fridays, I will have time reserved for consults with nonprofits. So that's being sent out in the notice with the grant, but essentially folks can sign up to talk through different application ideas with me, and or I can help review grants before they submit them. So I've done that in the past, and gives me kind of a little bit more of an idea about kind of what to expect on our side, help answer some questions, and also hopefully help them better prepare for the process of submitting an application. So just so that you know that on Fridays, that is when I have open time to meet with organizations. I'm hoping we can have a meeting on February 23rd. So that's on a Tuesday night, again, from 5:30 to 7:30. That meeting would be to review the grant reports that are currently coming in right now for this current grant cycle. Those I would send out ahead of time so that we can divide them up. Not everybody has to read every single one, but then we'll share back to each other. And those are available, they're available in Zoom grants. So everybody except for Hazel and Melissa should be able to log in and already start reading them if you want to, and I will add Hazel and Melissa to the list of folks who can see that. So you should get a notice, and I'll follow up with you after this meeting too. But those are pretty short. They help give us an understanding of if folks are meeting requirements for the grant for this year, and opportunity to discuss anything we need to know going into this next application cycle. They are due the last day of this month, and I currently have, I want to say, about 12 of the 18 reports in. So that's pretty good before the deadline. I expect to see all of those in, and then we'll be making that second and final grant payment to those organizations once they submit those. So then applications for this year will be due March 22nd. Once those are due, they will close. I am going to automatically create some materials for you all like I did last year. That's just an overview of who applied. Are there any concerns for disqualification, and kind of overall picture of how much is being asked for. And then I'm hoping we can then meet on March 23rd, which again is a Tuesday, just for an hour to go over that overview together, and talk about a plan for interviewing folks from the organizations in that list. So that is the plan for that meeting. And then I wanted to open it up for us to talk a little bit about dates and scheduling for April and May for the interviews and for deliberation. So we'll come back to that in a second. And then tentatively, the city council meeting where we would provide recommendations is probably June 1st or the Tuesday after that. So just so that you know what to expect there. So I think that is the schedule. Does anybody have a conflict on those Tuesdays that I have set for meetings that you know of this far?
On the schedule, you have like 2/22 and 2/23. Is that just a typo? Or?
The applications, oh yeah, you're right, yes.
Okay. I didn't know if that was code for something.
Yes,
but
I did think it looked weird, and now I realize why.
Yeah, so the reviewing grant reports, that's reviewing grants that we gave out last summer, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And they have a specific format they're supposed to follow for that.
They do. So they actually are all entered in Zoom grants. So as evaluators, you all should be able to see them, but we'll test that. I'll test that with you all in the next day or so, just to make sure that that's true.
Okay.
And we'll get you all access to those reports.
Lisa,
And then what I'll probably do is just make a list and assign out individual applications to each one of you as a committee member. So I'll send out that list.
So, Melissa, I'm sorry, Megan, I'm looking at someone's face. Megan, are we going to be doing site quote visits this year to the ones from last year, or has that been not happening this year?
Site visits are on hold right now just because of COVID precautions. I would like to be able to reapproach that later, but right now they're on hold. So that's one of my favorite parts too. Okay, so normally what happens for interviews, I think last year we ended up with 3 days of interviews, 3 or 4 days of interviews and 2 days of deliberation. And we cut down from where we were normally. So I'm just wondering from returning members, how you feel. We did not interview everyone last year. We kind of selected. I think that felt better as a process. So we could try and do something similar this year. And I think last year it was like if they were presenting a new program that we hadn't funded before, or they were a new applicant, then we interviewed them. But if they were returning, we didn't. So that feels, that seemed to work okay. But I just wanted to open up for any comment or discussion on that process.
Well, I think last year we started the season having or maybe the year before, I forget, but we had some discussion about, well, if they've gotten grants for the last 5 years running, we probably shouldn't consider them or give them a lower ceiling in the grant amount that they're eligible for. But that kind of went out the window with the whole COVID thing. Is that a conversation you're willing to entertain again?
Yeah, I think that's something we can talk about. I think it's in our grant, and I messaged to folks that kind of 3 years is the expected amount that they're funded before we really, if they're complying. It's competitive all the time, but that's where, it might be more difficult. And if we want to, be more hard and fast on that, I think that's just up to discussion from the committee and on the applications, if there would be anything in the applications that you would want to consider as part of that.
I think as part of that conversation, I think Megan, it was you who someone brought it forward, maybe it was Wei Wei, that we maybe, instead of a hard cutoff, maybe as we've been dropping off, maybe instead of 10,000, 8,000, 6,000, instead of like a hard cutoff to some of them as they get on their feet, even if we've been with them a long time. The other point someone made was we have some good community relationships. I think Scott was one of the one they pointed out was we have really built up some good relationships with some of these organizations, and is it worth keeping even a smaller bit of grant given to them just to keep up that relationship that we have with them? So those are two things that came up last time we discussed that. I also loved the process last year. The streamlined process was really good.
Yeah, I think what I appreciated from you all last year was we did some of the consensus building before the interviews, and then that kind of helped us speed up the process and during the interviews, and that helped us speed up the process when we got to the actual nights of deliberation too. So I'm hoping we can do some of that throughout the process again. But yeah, maybe there's an amount then that if you're after 3 years, we want to have as like a suggested cutoff or something like that. I don't know. Is that kind of what you're suggesting, Lisa?
So I'm saying like maybe every year, an organization comes back, we've been funding them, say, the 10,000 they ask for, and then all of a sudden, after 3 years, we say, okay, we're going to start funding you at lesser levels now. So maybe we'll go down to 5,000 instead of, unless they've really screwed up the year before, we don't want to fund them, or we have better options. But if we still really like them, instead of saying, no, not this year, because you got it for 3 years in a row, ease them off of it over a period of a couple of years. And help them get other grant sources. But something like the Oregon Food Bank, we know has tons of money from everywhere. That's not a bad feeling to say, not this year, but some other places, just easing them off. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe taking a couple of years.
Other thoughts on what Lisa shared, Jerome? Yeah.
I'm sorry to kind of speak with a forked tongue. Hi, Wei Wei. So we were just talking about maybe weaning consistent grant awardees over time. But based on last year's experience, we kind of drew the line on who we were going to fund, and then we had some extra money, and then we decided, well, we'll just increase. I can't remember what we did. Maybe increased across the board 20% or something to allocate that extra funding. So I think, and this is the forked tongue part, is, I think we're getting much more funding this year. Is based on your experience, Megan, is this really the right time to start thinking about weaning nonprofits off of this city fund, or is it something we should just table for another year? And that's one thing. And then the other thing is, in last year's award deliberations, we specifically started to exclude after school programs, for example, because there wasn't going to be any school. And so for your information sessions, are you running on the assumption that we're going to be back in school in the fall?
Yeah, I think that's one area I want to discuss amongst the kind of priority piece. So I'm just going to return to that one here in a minute. For the amount, so just to give you all an idea, the way it worked out is, so the $2.75 per capita that we got was an increase from the $2.10. That is what we used last year because it started this fiscal year. We're always a year ahead. So we had about $272,000 that we gave out last year, and that will be about the same this year. I think we'll see a pretty similar, my guess is we're going to see a pretty similar year in terms of competitiveness and what people are seeking for funding. We know that there's a really high need from a lot of organizations, and those organizations have additional financial needs too, some of which have been met for other means like CARES funding, and some which haven't. So especially going into this fiscal year. So that might be something we want to just identify as we go through. I think we're still kind of in a year, a little bit of unknowns in terms of what the full picture is. And so when we talk about the application too, one of the other areas is just how do we capture some of that in the questions that we're asking this year too? Because last year we, Hazel and Melissa, just so you know, last year the application closed basically on the date when offices started emptying. So the applications that we had did not capture the situation nonprofits were in for COVID, and we had to do some additional kind of interviewing and questioning about who was functioning and how and those types of things. So I'm hoping we can capture some more of that up front, and maybe it will help. Maybe then we return to this conversation and just see what the funding needs are, because I think that's going to be a question that comes is going to be asked of our committee too.
Megan, can I address Jeremy's question about the schools and what's happening with that? Is that or would like me to address that later?
Let's return to that when we get to the application.
I have a halfway answer to that.
Renu, did you
I had a question. So last year towards the end, what we decided is when we got the extra money, we decided we should prioritize funding for food as opposed to other needs. Is that something that we should do this year right from the get-go, or maybe defer it to later if we have money left over?
Yeah, so since there's some questions about priorities, maybe I'll just pivot to that really fast. And then we can kind of return to this piece around funding for returning applications and some of that as we go through. So priorities for our grant are set by City Council. And then we're able to help inform or make recommendations on that. So there haven't been any changes to the priorities for this current year. Currently, they're the same, and you all made some recommendations in terms of funding last year in light of COVID and what was happening. So I think that is something that that depending on how you feel going into this year, if there's things that that feel like we don't want to prioritize them, or they should, normally all of our priorities, health, homelessness, and after school are all kind of prioritized and weighted equally. If there's any changes we want to make there, I think that's something we might want to check in with City Council about, and also to just let folks know as they're in the process of applying as well. So I would love to just open a space to hear from you in terms of priorities that you're seeing within those categories. We did, I think, the after school kind of category, most of those were not operating at the time that we were doing grants this last cycle. I think that includes like some tutoring and some other kind of support, educational support that comes alongside actual like school programming too. So I will just, maybe Lisa, do you want to start and then open it up to anyone else who has thoughts on those priorities?
I can just tell you a little bit about the schools. Some of them around here, the teachers have finally been heard, and so the districts are now saying we'll wait until the teachers get their shots. So by the end of February, the younger kids are expected to go back. I'm expecting to go back to work at the end of February in Lake Oswego to start subbing again. Some of the districts aren't going back at all until the spring or whenever, but there are some going back. What the after-school program looks like is up in the air, but because pre-K teachers are also being really highly prioritized for shots, vaccinations, they're going to be opening some of those up. So I think it will be depending on where we get the grants from. They're going to have some special needs that they didn't have last year. They're going to have needs for cleaning. They're going to have needs for all the safety protocols. So I'm wondering whether when those places start asking, some of those grants may be directed at disinfecting. They have cohorts they have to follow, all the kinds of things they're going to need for COVID precautions. So that might be playing into the preschool and the after-school programs too. The after-school programs, because of COVID that were closed last year, because school is now opening, some of them may open and some may not. And my suggestion would be wait till the grants come in. Let's see if they are, because the grants will come in if they're opening. And then again, if they're opening, they'll probably be on a smaller scale, but they'll have to do things that they couldn't do before. Will have different needs. So that's the school thing. The other part of that is in September, when they apply now, those programs will go through September, October, November of next year. Schools should be open by then. We should be more back to somewhat normal. So we should keep that in mind too, that, maybe a lot of that funds, some of it we use now as people, kind of drip back in, but they will need it for summer catch-up programs and they'll need it for the fall. So that's the insight I have to that one.
So a couple things I'm hearing that I just want to return to. One is just around what we might see for asks in funding in terms of operational needs around COVID precautions, and just, how do we feel? Those are often the questions I get asked when people come and meet with me. So how do we feel about funding those types of things? And the second thing I'm hearing is in the application, definitely we need to capture some information about kind of how they're operating right now and how they anticipate operating throughout the fiscal year of funding. And obviously, like, nobody knows. I know when we did the applications in April, it was like, oh, in July, like everything will be back to normal. So we lived in a different world then. Yeah, so those are two things that I'm picking up that I just want to return to.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I said. The one thing that I'm hearing on the news and seeing that I would like to put forth as a priority also, and it already is the food issue. There seems to be a lot of emphasis on a real need for food items. So that would be something that I think we should keep in mind, that it's been all over the news that people are running out.
Okay, thanks. Other thoughts on priorities?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with what Lisa just said. I agree with her that there'll be needs popping up everywhere, but at the same time, there has been so much money allocated to education. In fact, of all programs, education is going to be fully funded simply because of the student success grant. For instance, the legislatures are also considering what to do in terms of reopening, plus any support that schools need will be there. Tomorrow, the legislatures have the floor totally open for people to testify all day tomorrow. So I think based on whatever parents and schools and the unions have said, the schools or early childhood education all the way up to high school will have additional funding. I do agree that the food is probably going to remain a problem. Another area, which I'm not quite sure 100%, is the PPE requirement, the personal protective equipment, like the masks, when kids go back to school. Because one thing I read about kids going back to school is that we are probably going to be required to wear masks for a long while. You know, I mean, today they even talk about double mask, triple mask. Anyway, so that's my thought.
I'm writing the priorities. Whoops, I just sent it to Lisa. Hold on, I'll send it to the whole group. Just so that you can see them there.
Just to chime in, sorry to interrupt, just
Go
to
ahead,
chime
Hazel.
in on the PPE, the counties, both specifically for us, Washington County, they're really active in pushing out masks and KN95 masks, which are not the same thing as a respirator. That could be like a deep dive that you never want me to take you on. So the PPE, the schools will have access to that coming from the county. And there are a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of work to get volunteer donations from manufacturers and from higher end companies. Like I can also speak to that VG does outreach to make sure that students and kids have masks already. And that's just us as a small example, but at the county level, there is a strong effort to push out PPE that's coming from the state that can't be necessarily used in a clinical or medical setting, but is available to the public. So that I think would be something that's also going to be covered. The cleaning supplies would be a different story. That might be something more concerning to the schools.
Yeah, and I feel like we saw some requests that included that the last time around. I think from like pantries that we funded just around needs for buying gloves and some cleaning supplies and those types of things. So I think that fits within kind of the general operations bucket that we tend to supply. and it's helpful. We have the right backgrounds here. We've got some educators, we got some COVID experts. So I think helping to connect some of those dots as we're seeing some of those things in the applications, I think those are areas to where we can ask questions and say, hey, like, did you know about this? Is there a way for you to, be able to get this funded through a different source? Those types of things, and make those connections as we go along. So that might be just an area where we want to both call out in the application and also just make it clear enough that we're able to ask some questions in that interview stage as well. Jerome? Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at the priorities, remind us on the application, do they pick one priority that they do rather than, we do health and we do after school education. And so that's one thing. And then the second one, I don't know if one of us attended or participated in the council session where the list was presented to the council, but was there any feedback from the council on our list as far as, yeah, you guys got it, you understand what our priorities are, or we kind of question one or two of them, or do we get any feedback at all from the council?
I think so. We didn't do it. We haven't done it since like the year before. I think like it would have been, I think it was, I want to say November in like 2019. And I think there were some additional things like you brought up, I think some job support type stuff as another category. And I think it was okay to just kind of subcategorize that under some of the existing ones. And there had also been, I think, some feedback about narrowing the after school education. And I think that was just as we see applications and you all decide what, meets that evaluation criteria of being timely and meeting the need best in the moment. So I think that was kind of how it was directed. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you all is you want to, or at least from our educators, is maybe it would be helpful to see some of those applications. And there might be some that with the current circumstances would qualify and would be great for being funded. And there might be others that aren't right at this time right now based on some of that criteria. Renu, go ahead.
Yeah, so we got extra money this year, so we might be, so I guess that is positive feedback, right?
It is positive feedback. I think there is potential for some growth there too. Right now we are, so even with the extra funding that we had last year, we funded a little less than 50% of the overall ask and applications. So it's a pretty competitive grant. You all have looked at those grants and really decided who is meeting the need. And I think just as a reminder, last year was also the first year that you fully funded the grant applications. So that was kind of how some of that additional money was allocated as well. So I think that was a big difference. And something we might just want to talk about that helped in, I think, the deliberation process too, was saying we're going to account for fully funding folks first before trying to add additional applications. So kind of keeping that on the list of lessons learned from last year. Okay, so in that priority piece, Jerome, just one question. So right now it is set that they just pick one. I can make it so that they can pick multiple, but usually what I have shared with folks is, since the next two questions are really like, how do you meet the priority? It's more compelling if they can make a case to us that's specific, but also usually they do fall into multiple categories. So it's just a preference of how you all want to read it and receive those. Would you rather that they're able to pick multiple, or would you rather that they're forced to pick one?
Well, I guess my line of thinking is that, considering that most of these it requires some kind of face-to-face interaction, the need for some level of PPE is required. And I suspect that for a lot of these organizations, just the cost of hand sanitizer and face masks and gloves and all this stuff is going to amount to a pretty good portion of their ask. And so if they come across and say, we want X amount of dollars, but 65% of it goes to PPE and other stuff, rather than after school education, specifically, then they might be hesitant to be called out for being lying to us, saying, we're asking for this money, but it's really mostly going to pay for masks and gloves and stuff.
So maybe one thing too, I can specify in the budget section that they have like a line item if they're going to include PPE or cleaning supplies in their ask, that is like in their, they line item that out in their budget. Or we can put like a question about how much of that ask would be dedicated to that. Would that be helpful to have like a more specific question called out for that?
Yeah. Question, because we have the COVID question. So how will that overlap with the COVID questions that we already have? And I guess the question we were going to use is the same COVID questions. Will that influence how we word the COVID questions?
Yeah, so a couple, I'll just bring up what we asked last year because I think it's kind of similar. And I don't want to add, I'm not trying to add a ton of questions to the application because that's more for you all to read. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on what we do. But some of what we asked last year was, how are you currently operating? And if so, how are you doing that in a way that takes COVID precautions into account? And if you're not, what's kind of your plan moving forward for any changes? So I think we're in a little bit different of a spot. I think that if they're not currently operating, probably it's not going to be the right time to apply for this grant. But maybe a question around how are they currently providing services in response to COVID-19? So that could both be precautions, but it could also be, it can be precautions like PPE or social distancing. It could also be things like staff are meeting folks virtually instead of like in person, or something like that as well. So I was struggling a little bit with just what do we need to get at in order to be able to differentiate between applications. We could also ask something, I think one of the questions you also asked is just like, how has your need changed or how have your services changed since COVID hit? And that's where we heard from pantries, like we're seeing 400% more folks than we've had in the past year. So maybe we want to be able to include something that captures that as well. Thoughts in those areas?
One area that strikes me as being sort of not very clear is the unemployment rate. Because now there's lots of sort of, the CARE Pact and the money that comes. I have no idea how many people truly are struggling because of lack of employment. I don't know how long the federal dollars will go on for a while and how long the state dollars will go on, right? So that is going to be a big unknown, but it could potentially be a big deal.
It could. I would anticipate we're going to hear about that from some of our homelessness providers, especially with regard to like the eviction moratorium and some of those pieces. So I will share one. This is just so that we can have something fun to share. If you haven't seen it already, there's something called the Beaverton Food Project. happening in Beaverton. It's actually a mutual aid project. It's not a nonprofit, so it's a little bit different. It's kind of community members just providing for other community members. And what they are doing is they're doing a series of what they call like basically free food fridges. Some of them are fridges and some of them are more like tiny libraries full of food. But there are several in Beaverton now, mostly in the central Beaverton area. Just as a plug for something food related that's happening. If you have extra supplies or know other folks who are looking for a place to go, that's something I stumbled upon recently. So I'll write it here in the chat. I can send it to you afterwards too. But I just went on a community tour because I wanted to see what they looked like. So I'll share that. But there's definitely some interesting projects popping up. I don't know what to expect. I definitely have heard from other pantries that we have not seen before. I think I have 1 or 2 new ones that have already approached me too. So that area of hunger, as you were bringing up, Renu, I think we're definitely going to see some pretty high requests in that area, would be my guess as well. And yeah, you are all going to be kind of the most informed about what's being provided in our community right now and what those gaps are. And I think maybe just collecting some of that in terms of where are the gaps still happening might be really helpful for when you present your recommendations. I think that might be some helpful information for the council and for the community in terms of what we might need to be targeting next. So, okay.
So, Megan, going back to Jerome's question, so will we have something that breaks out COVID-related expenses in their ask, or
yes.
What? Okay.
I will do 2 things. I will remind folks that in their budget, they should line item that out so that it's clear, but I will also add a question, just a question in the budget section too, where they can just type it in too, so that you guys can see it without, searching forever for that. So I will do that. And then I will add then just a question around service provision in the time of COVID right now. What precautions are they taking and how are services offered differently than they would be without COVID? Does that sound like that will get some additional information? Okay, anything else on the application? Any other areas where you all have felt like it's not clear enough as you're looking through the application, or people aren't answering in a way that's helpful to determining the differences? Jerome and then Lisa.
One question was, and we might have clarified it, but it was how many clients or people are you supporting in Beaverton or Washington County or the local area or something like this? And some of them misunderstood it to being how many people do you support in the entire world? And so there's, once a few of them started answering it wrong, it became pretty much useless information for everybody.
That's right. So maybe I'll just put both, so it's more, they can clearly tell that there's supposed to be a differentiation. So just total served by your program and then total Beaverton clients served by your program. I'll just put both of those in there so it's more clear.
That was my question. That was the same thing I was going to say. And I was going to ask people, just what you said was, did people feel that was clear? Because I still felt some gray area too, that people weren't really clear. We're asking how many Beaverton residents you're serving, and I don't know if we all got a clear picture of that last time. So how could we get a clearer picture of it this time? I had the same concern. So
okay, I believe that's reflected in the budget questions as well. So I will try and make sure that that's on both. Because I think there was a piece around like, how much is it going to cost? And some people put, you know, for their whole program, and then some people put just specific to Beaverton. So, so I'll try and clarify that in both parts of the application. Renu, were you going to add something?
Yeah, one other thing that I thought was sort of missing or not very clear in some applications was the sort of longer term impact. So are they just taking it on the current thing and then keep, do they keep doing the same thing, or are they making a long-term difference or making progress towards a long-term difference? So that is.
Yeah, I think in the need area, or maybe I'll need a secondary question. Tell me what you all think, but there used to be a piece that more specifically asked how they are addressing like root issues of poverty. And I'm not sure if that's like clearly asked in our application as is right now, which would get to that like deeper level of need. So I can put it in the guidance, like if you can address how this, how you'll get to these root causes of poverty, or I can pull it out as a separate question. Thoughts on what would be helpful there?
So Megan, were you thinking of actually asking them what, you know, just saying as a broad question, or did you want to designate what those root causes are? I would like to hear what organizations felt the root causes are. So we're instead of asking or describing.
Yeah, I think it asks them, I think it already asks them to identify kind of what are the specific needs that they're trying to address. But maybe in the guidance, I can say, please address root causes of poverty as part of your answer. And then there may be some, knowing kind of the spread of applications we have, there are some that are doing that, and there are some that aren't, that they're there to provide basic needs in the moment. So, and I think one of the biggest changes during COVID is just what I was going to say is there was definitely a lot more need for just those immediate services that we haven't always had to prioritize. But go ahead, Wei Wei.
This is probably an easy one to fix. Remember last year on the spreadsheet, not on the application, somehow the numbers can include the year. So suddenly it becomes a big number, you know, it's like, when did you start? It was like 1998 or something, and that will add up to like 20,000 or something. That's probably a bug in some of the applications. Okay.
Yeah, I asked Zoom grants, and so it doesn't show up for them when they're applying. It just shows up on our back end, and they can't get rid of it. So unfortunately, but actually the year, we might be able to take out that unless you all feel that it's helpful to have that year that they were established. But I feel like we generally know if they're brand new or if they've been around for a while. Strong feelings on keeping that one.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I think some of the information in the application is by year, how much of a grant they've received from us. Isn't that right?
That's very, very helpful, especially if we're going to start thinking about how we're going to wean people off. It's good to have that history.
Yeah, I'll still provide those history. I'm the keeper of the history, so I'll provide those history cards to you guys.
Don't you ever leave.
The history keeper, although we have several. Lisa's basically our history keeper at this point. Lisa Stiller here, so she remembers better than I do. Okay, cool. Well, I've got a couple things then to make some edits to the application, so I'll go in and do that so that we can capture some more of what's happening in this moment, and hopefully that helps kind of differentiate. I think just so I would like us to, at that March meeting, when we're looking at the overview of who applied, I would like us as a group to go over the evaluation criteria one more time as well, and just make sure we know kind of which questions contribute to which pieces of evaluation. But for these kind of pieces around COVID, to me, that's really like speaking to the need, the evaluation around the need, and is it serving, you know, a need that is timely and measurable and eminent here in the community. So I think we'll return to that, but just so that we kind of have something to work off of, we know how we're going to evaluate those down the line, I think is important. Okay. Woof, we made it through. We made it through that piece. Okay. There's always changes to the application. That's the fun thing. So Hazel and Melissa, as you go through this year, you know, from your own lens too, if there's things where you're like, wow, I still have questions that this application hasn't answered for me, and it's true for all of them. Just keep track of those things, because that's helpful when we come back to these conversations, and we can always make changes down the line, because that helps make your job of differentiating a little bit easier. So the applications, the really nice thing is we do work in Zoom grants. It has character limits. So all of the applications that you'll see are the same in terms of requirements and what they have to fill out. And it tells them if they didn't fill out an area. So everything should get to you completed, and with the same kind of set of expectations across the board. So I've appreciated that. For all the folks that were here before we had Zoom grants, it was a little bit more challenging, I think. So on both ends.
Say something about this, and this, you know, having been here from the beginning, the way the questions, the grant application has evolved is kind of amazing. So, you know, I remember the start, we're doing the paper. They've become a lot more targeted. We're getting a lot more information. I mean, I think it's just amazing the way that the changes that we've made over the past 7 years just elicit such a different, you know, much more depth of a response. So just wanted to throw that out there, that each year, everything we add to it really is remarkable.
Yeah, I think it's helpful for them, because they kind of know what to expect and what they're going to need to be able to respond to. So I think that's helpful. So I will address some of just kind of the additions and the kind of expectations around some of those questions around COVID and what we're looking for in that grant info session, just so that you all know that. Okay, the last piece is I just wanted to open up a little space to kind of share what the process looks like of going through interviews and deliberation with this team, what has gone really well, and what has been helpful as we do this. I think I shared a little in your application process, Hazel and Melissa, but we generally see 35 to 40 applications. We fund roughly half of those. So it is a intense process and a tough decision. So I just wanted, everybody has been through it, has been a new person at some point. So I just wanted to see if y'all had some advice in terms of first year. What are things that are helpful to focus on? What are things that are scary but doable? What should new folks know?
I'll throw a couple things out. So there's a lot of us looking at the same application, and we all see different things. Like Renu is, his perspective on their budgets is phenomenal, right? And I know if I spent 3 hours looking at a budget, I wouldn't get a tenth of what he picks up in about 5 minutes. And so we all have different strengths, and you know, I'm a prose guy, so I tend to read the paragraphs and things like that, and nicely worded sentences, and that's pretty much where I focus my analysis on. And everybody looks at something different, but I think what you'll find when we do our deliberations that certain of us will keep hammering at the same things for different organizations, because that's our strength, and I would assume that you're going to do the same thing, and so don't expect to read an application and know everything about that organization, because it's just not possible.
That's good advice. It is a lot of applications. I know both of you live here, so you know there's ones that you'll be familiar with, but there's sometimes applications where we're like, wait a second, we know this one, like we worked with this one, but with 35 it just takes that reminder. So don't be afraid to ask if you're not sure exactly what the services provided are, or if there's something else that might be important. We all have to ask each other. Wei Wei, were you going to share a few things?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't worry about remembering anything yet. Just write down what sort of like stands out for you for that grant, because chances are somebody else will point out something else that stands out for that person. So actually, going back to Jerome's point, eventually, just like a puzzle, we got it together and we sort of usually fund who needs to be funded. Just don't worry about remembering. Just read them and take some notes and come together.
I think just so that makes me think, so our model of consensus, just so you know, we generally do, well, it's nice on Zoom now too, but we'll generally do like some thumbs exercises, like, you know I know I want to fund this one, I'm going to fight to fund this one, you know, I still have some questions, but I'm not totally opposed to it, and you know there's no way I'm funding this thing. So I will say, just once you start looking over applications, having some shorthand for that on those, so that you know when we get to that point where you stand, can be really helpful. It will help speed that process up. I think that's true for everyone. So if it's, you know, different highlighters or just a mark or something like that, then when we'll spend most of our time discussing the ones where people are here, and we don't have to spend time talking about the one where everybody is totally on board for funding or totally against funding it. So this is where most of our 90% of our time is going to be spent. Yeah, Lisa.
One piece of advice is I learned very much the hard way is space out your evaluation. Like when you're going through this, don't try to do it all in 2 nights, because they all start running together. Space it out, even if you're just doing 3 or 4 a night or 5 a night. Don't try to do 8 or 9 a night, because they'll all start sounding the same. So space out when you're reading it, in the sense that, you know, a few of each night, and then they start all becoming entities of their own, rather than everything sounding like everything else and having to turn back to each one. So I think on top of all the other advice, that's the one that I would include, is do that really carefully so you can give each one a really fair reading.
Yeah, you should have about, I usually leave 2 to 3 weeks for review. So you have plenty of time to spread it out and to evaluate them. And, you know, nobody is going on spring break this year, right? So it always falls around that time. So I know you'll all be hard at work evaluating those applications.
Sorry, I forgot to mention something, a wish, actually a wish. I wish we could somehow categorize all of these applicants. For instance, if their goal is food, so I would like to just review all of the food applicants together, and then all of the after school program together, all of the sort of the housing together, just to make it easier for me to make the comparison.
Your wish is granted, Wei Wei. I will make a sortable Excel sheet that you can search by priority.
Right. Thank you.
A question to go with that is, did we decide what if they mark off 2 priorities? Would they go into their highest one?
I think I'm just going to keep it as one priority, but then we'll have some area where they can differentiate for some COVID specific needs. It sounded like that was kind of the piece where we might see the most overlap.
Do you think we are doing the Zoom interviews? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Yes. So I think that's my question is, I think we kind of talked a little bit. I think it's going to depend on what we see in the applications in terms of how many we want to interview this year. But I will save some dates. I will send you all the calendar after this meeting so that you have it. And then we'll just hold those dates. I think what I'll plan to do is, I think I did this last year too, but I will save more dates than hopefully we need, just in case we have to cancel or there's like, you know, I don't know, some other huge thing in the news that makes it so that we can't meet that night or something like that. So I will just send you a couple extra dates to hold for April and May. And then as we get applications in, we'll meet at the end of March, Wei Wei, to decide on kind of how we're gonna do that piece together. I think we did too many in a night last year. I got that impression. So we'll try and do some shorter nights over Zoom. Okay. Hazel, Melissa.
Hey.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. Yeah, this is Lisa Mutchler. I'm really sorry I had to get off video. Things went a little haywire over here, but I have been listening. I have a half asleep toddler in my lap in a dark room right now, so you wouldn't be able to see me anyway. But I just wanted to mention, as far as thoughts for our new committee members, and even for everyone else too, honestly. I don't know how you all have felt since you've all started, but the times when we're doing the interviews and the reviews it's extremely intense. Like, you are on mentally, emotionally, like from like an empathy perspective, you know, you are like on for just like a few hours at a time. So I do love the idea, Megan, of maybe doing closer to like, I don't know, 5 or 6 instead. Did we try to do like 8 last year?
Per night, yeah.
Yeah. So I think cutting it down a little will help that. But basically what I wanted to tell all of you, and I was actually going to tell everyone this anyway, I think I told you, Megan, that I'm going to take off work. I'm like, you know, I'm going to use vacation days for this because it's worth it to like have more bandwidth, you know, and I'm certainly not using my vacation days to travel. So just like you said, so I might as well make use of them. And of course, I mean, that's a privilege that I even get vacation days. I work for a big multinational corporation called Eaton. But yeah, that is my plan. So probably the nights we interview and then the deliberation, like I'm just going to take off and just, you know that I need that kind of extra space on those days.
Well, if you can take, okay, I'm retired, so I can't really say that I take the days off or not. But
Sure.
what I'm saying is, for those of you who can take the time off, maybe we can start a little early. I mean, by 5 o'clock, people are not quite energetic, right? That's part of the problem, I think, last year. And we were not very good at Zoom. Now we are sort of, well, I figured out what I do is for Zoom meetings, I fold origami.
I love it. That's a great idea. I do think it would be, I can send something out and we can talk about this for interviews, but I do think most of the nonprofits would prefer it was during the workday versus in the evening. So if there is maybe even 1 or 2 of the interview days and maybe not everyone is able to make it, maybe that's something we want to explore. So let's come back to that, because I think we could figure out a way to do some of that a little bit earlier for some of you. And then if folks are working, they can join later, and or we'll have some other nights that are later too. Yeah, Lisa.
So I guess as someone who hopefully will be working during the day very soon, I would be working from, usually it's 8 in the morning, getting home between 3:30 and 4. I really would prefer to be present for all the interviews. I think it's only the fairest way for us to be able to assess them. So I would really encourage us to try to make a time when most of us are available. I cannot join a meeting if I'm in a classroom. So I would really encourage us to try to keep it to times when everyone can be there. And I know that, I don't mind moving it to 4:30 or 5 or 5:30. I know that because we're on Zoom, we might want to think, when we're together, we have dinner together, which is awesome. So I'm hoping some of you who are new get to meet in person when we really make and supply these awesome dinners. But I would really try to stress a preference for times when we can all be part of that interview process, because if we're going to have a fair decision making, we all need to be present and hear everything. And I don't mind moving it down to 4:30 or 5, but I think for those of us working during the day, we really do need to have some room to be present.
Cool. I can also try and work some breaks in there too, rather than just doing 8 interviews back to back. So it's new to Zoom, and I really, really gave you guys the full intro there. So thanks. I think that's great feedback. Hazel, Melissa, I will be setting something up with you as I add you to Zoom grants, just so that we can go through it together and I can show you the different areas and what to look for, and also how some of the evaluation works on that side. So I can answer additional questions about kind of that process as we get there, but also just wanted to see if you had anything else you want to ask the committee right now, or thoughts that you're having about the year ahead.
All good at this moment in time.
Cool.
There it goes. I don't have any questions. I was having a problem unmuting.
For those of you that have Zoom grants right now and know your login information, can you do me a favor and just check and see if you have access to the reports? And if you don't, send me a quick message. I'll double check on the back end too, but I can't always tell what you can see.
Can you send us our logins or remind us what our login is?
I don't think so. I think you have to go through Zoom grants for it, but I have to make some edits to the folks that have access on the back end. So I'll double check, Lisa. Yeah, Jerome.
Just kind of a tail end question here. I might have been dreaming, but I think we might have taken a vote last year to empower you based on your experience and knowledge to just kind of cull the applications of the ones that you know we won't ever fund. And so we won't spend time looking at obvious no's. Is that, or was I just dreaming?
We had a conversation about it. I did, thank you for the reminder, actually. In the application, the creation of the application this year, I made it much more clear that folks would be disqualified if they're receiving CDBG grant funding. So that is written into the expectations. So I will be able to manually, disqualify those before you all start going through them next year. So I think that was kind of the big category where that was an issue. Just so that you know, so Hazel and Melissa, the city has two sources of social service funding. One is the grant that you all are advising on, and then the other is community development block grants. Those are federal grants, and they do have a public service component. So the decision was made, the two grants actually used to be one grant that was all considered together, and they were broken to kind of simplify. Obviously, a federal grant application is really complicated. So for folks that receive CDBG, we do not fund them that year through social service funding. And that's obviously, it's just so competitive. So trying to be able to fund more organizations rather than the same couple. So that is very clear in the criteria. And their application closes a little bit later this year, but I will know who they are before we start evaluating our grants. They will be selected. So I will follow up with folks because they don't always know when they start our grant application process, which is some of the difficulty, but they will know before the grant closes. So I will communicate on that piece. And that's a few less applications for you all to read.
Does anybody remember the password? I can't remember.
Yeah,
the
it is
password.
social services 1. So I can see the reports.
Now the world's gonna know it's recorded. All right. The last thing that I'll just say, I say this every time and I say it in multiple spaces, but the first year is always overwhelming for everyone going through this. And so everybody has been through some cycles, but I want to encourage you both to speak up and to ask questions. If you're confused, if you're like concerned about an application, but you're not sure if it's like, something everybody else has already resolved, bring it up. You will not be the first folks to do it. And guaranteed, if there's something that you're already thinking about, other folks either are thinking it or haven't noticed it yet, and it would be a great topic of discussion. So I think it can be hard to dive in just because there's generally like a history, and folks know kind of what to expect from some applications. But I will just try to make space for you all to do that. And if we can all kind of remember to, as we're going through applications for the first time, just make sure we're all very clear on what services are they providing and have we seen them before. We can do that as a group together. And I will help provide some of those history pieces as we get together.
It does not work for me. So what do we do if I can't get in?
Let me try some stuff on the back end, by the way. Has anybody else been able to get in? Okay. Experiment, let me know, and then I will make some changes and email you all.
Okay.
And I will yeah, probably depending on what access looks like, I will just email you all some reports to read in like PDF form, because you'll only get like 2 or 3 each. So I might do that too and just make it simpler.
Quick
Lisa?
question. This is a quick question. I know we're not going to be doing site visits this year, and that's the way we get some questions answered. If we're going through a grant and we have a serious question that we feel, we wish we had a site visit, is there a workaround saying this is something we really need to know about this organization? Is there something we can do to get that other information?
That's a good question. I've had that question too. So I'm glad you're bringing it up. Thoughts from the committee on that in terms of if there's folks we're not interviewing that we have questions about, do we want to add them to the interview list? Do we want to make time where we can send 1 or 2 follow-up questions? Or do we want to focus on what we have?
Didn't we always ask you?
You can ask me. Yes, I'm happy to go and ask any follow-up questions that might be needed. But I just want to decide, I just want to know if we're going to do that we have it as an option for multiple organizations. So does that, if there's something that's kind of, we'll make it or break it, do you guys want to then just make space for having me ask follow-up questions? Okay, and then I'll bring it back to the next meeting that we would have. Okay. Make it or break it questions. Not like, are you open on Thursdays? Cool. Okay, so just to recap, we've got a couple changes to the applications that I will make. I will be following up with some Zoom grants info for all of you, but also adding Hazel and Melissa and doing a follow-up session. We will please save the date for February 23rd. That is when we will be reviewing the grant reports from this current fiscal year. And so I will send out some info about that. And then if you would like to join the grant info session that I'm hosting on February 9th, you are welcome to. I will send that Zoom link to all of you so that you have it.
What time, Megan? What time is it?
It's from 1 to 2.
Right. I won't be working by then, so I can do that.
Cool. And then, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Spread the word if there's any organizations you're working with or volunteering for. I'll be sending out notice in the next couple days that the grant will be open on February 1st. So we're about to start the 2021 season of grant funding.
Okay, great.
So I appreciate all of you. We will be figuring something out for like a virtual dinner. I'm hoping to provide from afar from my office. So more information coming soon. But you all deserve it because you spend a lot of time reviewing these applications and doing this work. So I'm very thankful, and we couldn't do it without you. So if there's anything else that comes up or that you think I need to follow up on, or that you need in doing your work, please don't hesitate to email me. I am around. And happy to take time to make a different document or make it in a different order if it helps you out in the process of doing the work.
You're going to email us the link to get into the Zoom grants, right? Because I just went all through my emails and I couldn't find the link to get in.
Yep. I'll either email you one directly or I'll email you Zoom grants
Okay.
info. Cool. Okay. Well, stay healthy, stay safe, everyone, and we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Melissa,
Thank you.
where do you
Bye.
work at?
Bye.
Melissa, where do you work?